My name is Daniel Hayes. I was 27 years old in 1938, and I worked at a funeral home in Pennsylvania. My job was simple. The dead came in. I cleaned them, dressed them, prepared them for viewing, and made sure they looked peaceful enough for their families to say goodbye. You get used to it. Or you think you do. One Thursday night, around midnight, a police officer brought us a body from room 6 at the Franklin Hotel. Male. 43. Name, Edward Miller. Cause of death, suicide. The officer gave me the paperwork and left. I looked at the body. Something immediately felt wrong. Edward was still wearing his shirt and trousers. His shoes were missing. His right sleeve was torn near the elbow. I checked his hands. There were bruises around both wrists. That wasn't normal. I called my supervisor. He looked at the body for about 10 seconds. "Don't make trouble, Daniel." I didn't say anything. "You were about to." He walked away. "Fine." I kept working. While cleaning the man's face, I noticed a small cut behind his left ear. Then another bruise beneath his jaw. I stopped. Someone had grabbed him hard. I wrote everything down in my notebook. Then I noticed something inside his jacket. A hotel key. Room 12. Not room 6. I showed it to my supervisor. He took it from me immediately. "Forget you saw this." "Why?" "Because you're paid to prepare bodies, not investigate them." "Fair enough." I went back to work. At around 1 in the morning, I heard the front door open. I looked through the hallway. The same police officer had returned. He wasn't alone. A tall man in a gray coat stood beside him. The man didn't look at me. He walked directly toward the preparation room. I stepped in front of him. "Can I help you?" He looked at Edward's body. "I'm here for the identification." The police already identified him. "I know." He walked around me. Then he leaned over the body. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look sad. He looked interested. He lifted Edward's hand and examined the fingernails. Then he checked his neck. Then the bruises on his wrists. I asked, "What exactly are you looking for?" He looked at me. "Nothing." Then he left. I waited until the door closed. Something bothered me. I checked Edward's mouth. There was a tiny piece of blue fabric caught between his teeth. I pulled it out. It wasn't from his clothes. I put it in an envelope. The next morning, Edward's family arrived. His wife walked into the viewing room, looked at the body, and immediately started crying. Then she stopped. She stared at me. "Who did this to him?" I froze. "What?" She stepped closer. "My husband never wore shoes without socks." I looked down. Edward's feet were bare. She grabbed my arm. "Someone killed him." Before I could answer, my supervisor pulled her away. The funeral was scheduled for the next morning. That afternoon, another body arrived. Male. 29. Dead from what the paperwork called a fall. I opened the bag. Same bruises. Same torn sleeve. Same small cut behind the ear. I looked at my supervisor. He looked back at me. Neither of us spoke. Then I checked the man's pocket. Inside was a hotel key. Room 12. I slowly closed my notebook. For the first time in my life, I was looking forward to going home. Because I had just realized something. The dead man from room 6 wasn't the beginning. He was number 2. I should have gone home. Instead, I stayed. That's the problem with curiosity. It starts as a question and ends with you standing beside a dead man at 2 in the morning wondering how badly your life can go. I pulled the old records from the basement. 3 years of death certificates. Burial records. Police reports. Hospital transfers. I started looking for the same injuries. Within an hour, I had 4 more. Different names. Different causes of death. Same bruising around the wrists. Same cut behind the left ear. And every body had been processed through our funeral home. I checked the dates. The deaths were usually followed by funerals within 24 hours. Too fast. Almost like someone wanted them gone before anybody started asking questions. Then I found the hotel connection. All 5 victims had stayed at the Franklin Hotel shortly before they died. I went there the next morning. I told the manager I was collecting information for a newspaper obituary. He barely looked at me. Room numbers. I gave him the names. His expression changed. He leaned closer. Why are you asking about them? Because they're dead. He looked toward the lobby. Then whispered. Room 12. I asked who stayed there. He said nobody. That was a lie. I knew it immediately. I pushed the register toward him. Then why is room 12 listed every week? He went pale. Before he could answer, someone called his name from the hallway. The same man in the gray coat walked into the lobby. He saw me. I saw him. Neither of us moved. Then he smiled. You work at the funeral home? Yes. You should go back there. Why? Because another body is coming. He walked past me. I grabbed his arm. He stopped. You know these people. He looked at my hand. Then at me. You don't want to know them. I let go. He left. 3 hours later, a body arrived. Female. 36. Her name was Clara Wilson. The paperwork said accidental drowning. She had supposedly fallen into the river. I prepared her myself. There was water in her lungs. That part was real. But there were bruises around her wrists. And underneath her fingernails, I found gray paint. I checked her clothing. There was a small brass key sewn into the inside of her coat. The number on it was 12. I didn't tell anyone. I took the key home. That night, I returned to the funeral home after everyone left. The basement was empty. I went through the records again. This time, I found something I hadn't noticed before. Every victim had been visited by the same person before death. The name appeared in different forms. Sometimes just an initial. Sometimes a fake name. But the handwriting was identical. I compared it with the funeral documents. The signature belonged to the man in the gray coat. I was still looking at the papers when I heard the front door open. Someone entered. Footsteps moved through the hallway. Slow. Calm. I turned off the basement light. The footsteps stopped outside the preparation room. The door opened. It was him. He walked straight to Clara's body. I watched from the darkness. He pulled a small leather case from his coat. Then he opened Clara's mouth. He wasn't checking her teeth. He was looking underneath her tongue. I stepped out. What are you doing? He didn't even flinch. He looked at me and said, checking whether she talked. Talked about what? He closed the case. You've been looking through the records. I said nothing. He smiled. You're going to stop? No. His smile disappeared. You should. I moved closer. You killed these people. He looked at Clara. No. Then who did? He leaned toward me. The same person who will kill you if you keep asking questions. He walked toward the door. I followed him. What's in room 12? He stopped. Then slowly turned around. Nothing. He opened the door. Before leaving, he looked at me one last time. That's why nobody ever comes back from it. The door closed. I stood there alone. Then I heard something behind me. A soft metallic sound. I turned. Clara's body was still on the table. But the brass key I had taken from her coat was gone. And written on the preparation room mirror in fresh red ink were 4 words. You're next on the table. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the message on the mirror. You're next on the table. By morning, it was gone. The mirror was clean. No blood. No fingerprints. Nothing. My supervisor walked in and asked why I looked like hell. I told him I had a bad night. He said, get used to them. Then the front door opened. 2 police officers carried in another body. A man. No identification. No wallet. No paperwork except a single death certificate. Cause of death. Unknown. I pulled back the sheet. There was a deep bruise around his neck. His wrists were marked. And behind his left ear was the same small cut. I stared at him. Then I noticed something in his hand. A piece of paper. I pulled it free. There was only one sentence. Room 12. Tonight. I looked at my supervisor. He didn't see the note. I put it in my pocket. That evening, I went back to the Franklin Hotel. I didn't tell the police. I didn't tell my supervisor. I didn't tell anybody. I took the brass key and walked upstairs. Room 12 was at the end of the hallway. The door was locked. I inserted the key. It opened. The room was empty. No bed. No furniture. Just a wooden table in the center. And dozens of files stacked against the wall. I opened the first one. Photographs. Dead bodies. Every person I had prepared over the last 3 years. I opened another. More names. More photographs. Then I found a folder with my own name. I opened it. Inside was a photograph of me working at the funeral home. The date was 2 weeks earlier. I turned the page. Another photograph. Me carrying a body. Then another. Me standing beside the preparation table. Someone had been watching me for months. The final page contained a death certificate. My name. My age. My address. The date of death was tomorrow. I heard the door close behind me. I turned. The man in the gray coat was standing there. He looked tired. Not afraid. Just tired. You finally came. I pointed at the folder. What is this? The truth. Then start talking. He sat down. He told me the people I had been preparing weren't random victims. They had all discovered the same operation. Money. Extortion. Illegal deals. People in town were paying to make problems disappear. When someone threatened to expose them, the person disappeared. Then the funeral home received the body. The cause of death was changed. The funeral happened quickly. And everyone moved on. I asked him why he was involved. He looked at me. Because I was trying to stop it. I didn't believe him. Then he gave me the key to room 12. He said it had belonged to the man running everything. The man who ordered the murders. Who? He pointed toward the door. My supervisor walked in. I froze. He looked at me. Then at the gray-coated man. You should have left it alone. The gray-coated man stood. You've buried enough people. My supervisor pulled a pistol. The gunshot hit him in the chest. He dropped beside the table. I ran. My supervisor fired again. The bullet hit the wall. I grabbed the files and threw them through the window. He chased me downstairs. I reached the lobby. Police sirens suddenly filled the street. My supervisor stopped. The gray-coated man had called them before we entered the room. 2 officers rushed inside. My supervisor dropped the gun. He was arrested that night. The investigation lasted months. They found bodies, records, names, payments. Enough evidence to connect him to 7 murders. The man in the gray coat survived his wound. He disappeared before the trial. Nobody ever found him. As for me, I quit the funeral home. I never touched another body professionally. But I still remember the last thing my supervisor said before they took him away. He looked at me and smiled. You think you found all of them? I didn't understand. Not until the police searched the basement. Behind one wall, they found another room. No files. No weapons. Just 12 empty tables. And on the floor, 12 fresh death certificates. 11 belonged to people who were still alive. The 12th belonged to me. My name was crossed out. Someone had written a new name underneath it. The name of the man who had been lying on my preparation table that morning. The unidentified body. He wasn't a victim. He had been the one sending me the warnings. And according to the records, he had died in 1938. 30 years before I ever started working there. Pay close attention to this story, boss. My name is Frank Miller. I was 34 years old in 1952, and I worked nights in a city hospital morgue in Chicago. It wasn't glamorous work. Most people thought I spent my nights staring at dead bodies. I did. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was remembering that every body had once been somebody. At 1:14 a.m., the police brought in a man they had found behind a bar on West Madison Street. No wallet. No identification. No witnesses. The officer handed me the paperwork. Male. Approximately 40. Possible robbery. I pulled the sheet back. The man had a deep wound above his left eyebrow. His coat was torn. His pockets were empty. I started the intake examination. That's when I noticed his hands. There was black material packed underneath his fingernails. Not dirt. Not grease. Something finer. I scraped a little into an evidence envelope. Then I noticed a second injury. A narrow cut across his chest. It looked old. Maybe several days old. That didn't make sense. The officer said the man had been killed that night. I checked the body temperature. Then I checked it again. Something was wrong. The body had been dead longer than the report claimed. I called the officer back. You said you found him at midnight? That's right. He's been dead for hours. The officer stared at me. You sure? I work with dead people every night. I'm pretty sure. He didn't laugh. He looked at the body. Then he looked at me. Just put him in the drawer. I didn't. I asked him who had identified the body. Nobody. Then why does the report already list the cause of death? He paused. Robbery. That isn't a cause of death. He stared at me for a few seconds. Then he took the paperwork from my hand. Forget it. He left. I watched him walk away. Something about the whole thing bothered me. I checked the intake log. The body had been recorded as arriving at 1:14 a.m. But there was another entry underneath it. Same name. Same body. Same date. 11:42 p.m. I stared at the two entries. Someone had logged the body before the police supposedly found it. I checked the handwriting. The first entry was mine. The second wasn't. I pulled the old records. Nothing. Then I heard the elevator open. A nurse rolled another body into the morgue. Female. 26. Car accident. I signed the form and pulled the sheet back. She had bruises across her ribs. Normal for a crash. Then I saw her hands. Black material underneath the fingernails. Exactly like the first body. I looked at the clock. 2:03 a.m. Two bodies. Same strange substance. Same unexplained injury. I checked her pockets. Nothing. Then I found a small brass key taped beneath her wrist. The number 17 was stamped into it. I wrote it down. Before I could examine it further, the morgue door opened. A man in a dark suit walked in. He wasn't hospital staff. He didn't ask permission. He walked directly toward the unidentified man. I stepped in front of him. Can I help you? He looked at the body. No. Then you're in the wrong room. He ignored me. He lifted the dead man's hand and examined the fingernails. Then he checked the cut across his chest. He knew exactly where to look. I asked him, "Who are you?" He finally looked at me. Someone who doesn't want you asking questions. Then he walked out. I followed him into the hallway. He was already gone. I returned to the morgue. The brass key was still on the table. Except the number had changed. It no longer said 17. Someone had scratched a new number into it. 12. I looked at the two bodies. Then at the morgue door. For the first time in 3 years, I locked it from the inside. And I had a feeling I wasn't locking people out. I was locking myself in. I didn't tell the police about the man in the dark suit. I didn't tell my supervisor either. I knew enough about hospitals to understand one thing: people started asking questions when they saw paperwork that didn't make sense. And I had plenty of paperwork that didn't make sense. The next morning, I went through the morgue records before my shift ended. I started with the unidentified man. Nothing. No fingerprints. No missing person report. No hospital record. It was as if the man had never existed before he died. Then I checked the woman from the car accident. Her name was Margaret Cole. 26. No criminal record. No connection to the unidentified man. But 3 months earlier, she'd been treated at our hospital for a broken wrist. The doctor listed on her file was Dr. Charles Avery. I knew him. Everybody did. Avery was one of the senior surgeons. Quiet. Polite. always perfectly dressed. I kept reading. Margaret had been discharged after 2 days. Her file was normal. Except for one thing. Someone had opened it at 3:12 a.m. the night before she died. There was no reason for anyone to be in her file. I checked the unidentified man. His file had also been opened at 3:12 a.m. Same person. Same time. I looked at the access log. The signature was almost impossible to read. But the initials were clear. CA. I put the files away. Then I remembered the key. Number 12. I spent the afternoon looking for a drawer numbered 12. The morgue had 36. Most were in use. Some were empty. One had been sealed for years. Number 12. I tried the key. It opened. Inside was a cardboard box. No body. Just personal belongings. Dozens of them. Watches. Rings. Wallets. Keys. Small bags. I pulled out a notebook. The first page had a date from 1950. Then a name. Then another. Then another. I recognized several. All were people who had died in the hospital. I checked their death certificates. Accidents. Heart attacks. Infections. One suicide. But the notebook contained something the official records didn't. Next to each name was a number. I looked at the first one. 17. The same number from the brass key. I turned the page. More names. More numbers. Then I found something that made my stomach tighten. A name I recognized. Margaret Cole, 12. I kept turning pages. There were 7 names under number 12. Every one of them was dead. I heard footsteps outside. I closed the box. The morgue door opened. Dr. Avery walked in. He looked at me. Then at drawer 12. You shouldn't be in there. I asked, why? That's hospital property. So are the bodies. He didn't smile. I held up the notebook. What are these numbers? He walked toward me. Give me that. No. He stopped. You don't understand what you're looking at. Then explain it. He looked at the bodies behind me. Then lowered his voice. Some people don't die when they're supposed to. I stared at him. That doesn't explain anything. It explains everything. Before I could answer, the elevator bell rang. Someone was bringing another body down. A police officer pushed the stretcher into the room. Male. Found in an alley. I pulled back the sheet. My heart stopped. I knew him. He was the police officer who had brought me the first body. His throat had been cut. His hands had the same black material underneath the nails. I looked at Avery. He didn't seem surprised. That scared me more than the body. I checked the officer's pocket. There was a folded piece of paper. I opened it. 4 words. Frank Miller knows too much. I looked up. Avery was gone. I ran to the hallway. Nothing. Then I heard the elevator doors close. I ran back inside. The body was still on the table. But the paper was gone. So was the black material from beneath his fingernails. Someone had cleaned the body while I was gone. In less than 30 seconds. I looked at drawer 12. It was open again. The cardboard box was gone. And on the metal door, someone had written a message with a fingertip. Tonight. 3:12 a.m. I stared at it. Then I heard the morgue elevator open. Nobody stepped out. But something was being dragged across the floor. Slowly. Toward me. I reached for the light switch. The lights went out first. I didn't move. The dragging sound stopped beside me. For a few seconds, the morgue was completely silent. Then I heard the elevator doors close. I turned on my flashlight. Nothing was there. Just a long trail of water across the floor. It led directly to drawer 12. I opened it. Empty. I checked the other drawers. Nothing. Then I noticed something on the floor. A hospital identification bracelet. It belonged to the police officer who had arrived dead earlier. I picked it up. There was a number written on the back. 3:12. I finally understood. The time wasn't random. Someone was using the morgue records to schedule when bodies disappeared. I went upstairs and found Dr. Avery in his office. He was alone. I put the bracelet on his desk. Explain it. He looked at it. Then closed his eyes. You should leave. I've heard that before. This isn't a joke. I know. He opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. They're stealing bodies. I stared at him. Who? People inside the hospital. He explained that several employees had been involved in stealing narcotics and medical supplies. When someone discovered the operation, they became a problem. The victims were killed outside the hospital. Then their bodies were brought in with fake paperwork. Once inside, their records were altered. Some were labeled accidents. Others were labeled suicides. Their belongings were placed in drawer 12. Then everything disappeared. I asked him who was behind it. He looked at me. I don't know. You expect me to believe that? No. He pushed one final document toward me. It was a list of names. At the bottom was mine. I stared at it. My name had been typed under the heading. Next transfer. I looked at Avery. When? Tonight. I stood up. Then we're going to stop it. He shook his head. You don't understand. Whoever is doing this has access to the entire hospital. We went back to the morgue. I locked the doors. Then I turned off every light except the one above the examination table. At 3:07 a.m., nothing happened. 3:08. 3:09. 3:10. Then the elevator started moving. Down. Slowly. 3:11. The doors opened. A stretcher rolled out. Nobody was pushing it. I stepped closer. There was a body underneath the sheet. I pulled it back. It was me. My own face. My own clothes. A deep cut across my throat. I stepped backward. Avery whispered. They already made the body. Then the morgue lights came on. 6 men were standing behind us. Hospital employees. One of them was my supervisor. He looked at me and said, "You should have stayed out of the records." I reached for the alarm. He grabbed my arm. Avery hit him with a metal tray. Everything exploded at once. People shouted. The alarm started screaming. Someone fired a gun. The bullet hit the ceiling. I grabbed the nearest evidence box and threw it into the light fixture. The room went dark. I heard someone fall. Then police sirens outside. The men tried to escape through the rear entrance. They didn't make it. The police had already surrounded the building. By sunrise, 6 people were arrested. The investigation uncovered 8 murders. Possibly more. Drawer 12 contained belongings from 17 unidentified victims. But there was one thing nobody could explain. The body that had been placed on my examination table was real. It had my face, my fingerprints, my scars, even an old fracture in my wrist. The medical examiner couldn't explain it. I couldn't either. The official report eventually said the body was created using altered hospital records and a deceased man whose identity had been replaced. That explanation satisfied everyone. It didn't satisfy me. Because the body disappeared before the investigation ended. Someone removed it from the evidence room. No record. No signature. Nothing. I quit the hospital 2 weeks later. I never worked in a morgue again. But I kept one thing from drawer 12. The brass key. Number 12. I still have it. And sometimes, when I wake up at exactly 3:12 in the morning, I swear I can hear an elevator opening somewhere in the house. Then I hear wheels rolling across the floor. Slowly. Coming toward my bedroom. I never open the door. Because I already know what is waiting outside. A stretcher. And a body with my name on it. My name is Jack Turner. I was 29 years old in December 1944, and I drove an ambulance for the U.S. Army in Belgium. I wasn't a rifleman. I didn't storm buildings. I didn't carry a machine gun. My job was to drive toward the fighting, pick up wounded men, and get them back alive. Most days, that was enough. Bastogne was different. The snow had been falling for days, and the roads were packed with ice, mud, and abandoned equipment. German artillery was hitting the area constantly. At 6:40 that morning, a medic ran into our garage. "Turner. Get your ambulance." "How many?" "4. "That's all." He looked at me. "That's all we have room for." I started the engine. It coughed twice before finally turning over. A few minutes later, I was driving toward the front. The farther I went, the worse the road became. Shell craters. Burned trucks. Dead horses. Men walking through the snow carrying wounded soldiers. I kept driving. When I reached the aid station, a medic opened the rear doors. 4 at a time. I know. We loaded them quickly. One man had a bullet wound through his shoulder. Another had shrapnel buried in his leg. The third was unconscious. The fourth was covered with a blanket. I asked the medic, "What's wrong with him?" "Chest wound." "Alive?" "For now." I closed the doors. Then I noticed another soldier standing beside the building. He was staring at the ambulance. "Need a ride?" He shook his head. "Not me." I looked around. "Then who?" He pointed toward the trees. "There are more of them out there." The medic shouted at him. "We're full." The soldier looked at me. "You're going back, aren't you?" I didn't answer. I knew I was. I always did. I drove away. About 20 minutes into the trip, artillery exploded somewhere behind us. The wounded man with the chest injury suddenly started pounding on the metal wall. Bang! 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 I pulled over. "Easy." He kept hitting. I opened the rear doors. He grabbed my sleeve. "Don't take me to the hospital." "What?" "Turn around. You're bleeding. There are men back there." I looked at the medic. He was already shaking his head. The wounded soldier grabbed me again. They're trapped. Where? Old Farm. North Road. What's your unit? He told me. I knew the name. They had been missing since the previous night. I looked at the road ahead. Then at the road behind me. The medic said, "Jack, we have 3 other wounded men." I knew. But the soldier wouldn't let go. Please. That word stayed with me. I closed the doors. Then I turned the ambulance around. The medic stared at me. "You're going back?" "Yeah." "For what?" I looked through the windshield at the snow. "To pick up the men we left behind." The road back was worse. German shells were landing closer now. We reached the farm just after 8 o'clock. The building was half destroyed. No movement. I stepped out with my pistol. "U.S. Army." "Nothing." I shouted again. Then I heard something. A voice from inside. "Help." We rushed in. There were 6 American soldiers hiding beneath the collapsed floor. 3 were wounded. 1 was barely conscious. The others had been trapped since the previous night. The first soldier looked at me and laughed. "You actually came back." I looked at him. "You said you needed a ride." He pointed toward the ambulance. "That's the first good news I've heard all day." We started carrying them out. Then I heard artillery in the distance. The medic froze. "Jack." "What?" He looked toward the road. "We need to leave." I looked at the 6 wounded men. Our ambulance could carry 4. And the Germans were getting closer. Then something moved inside the ruined farm. Not one of the soldiers. A slow scraping sound came from beneath the floor. Everyone stopped. I raised my pistol. The trapped men stared at each other. One whispered. "That's why we couldn't leave." The medic looked at me. "What the hell was that?" Nobody answered. Then came 3 slow knocks from beneath the broken boards. Knock. 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 I felt my stomach tighten. We had come looking for 6 men. Now I wasn't sure how many people were actually trapped down there. We had 6 wounded men and room for 4. That was the kind of math nobody wanted to do in a war. The medic looked at me. "2 stay." I looked at the men lying in the snow. Nobody said anything. One of them had a shattered leg. Another was bleeding through a field dressing wrapped around his stomach. The third couldn't stop coughing. The fourth kept asking for water. The other 2 could still walk, but barely. I opened the ambulance doors. "Get the worst ones inside." The medic hesitated. "Which 2?" I pointed. "The ones who won't make it without us." We loaded them. The others helped as much as they could. Then one of the men grabbed my sleeve. "Don't leave us." I looked at him. "I'll be back." He stared at me. "You promise?" I didn't answer. I shut the doors. We drove. The ambulance bounced over the frozen road while artillery exploded behind us. Inside, the medic worked on the wounded men. I could hear them shouting through the metal partition. Then someone screamed. I slammed on the brakes. "What happened?" The medic yelled. "He's bleeding out." I jumped out and opened the rear doors. The soldier with the stomach wound was losing blood fast. The medic pressed both hands against the wound. "We need the hospital now." I got back behind the wheel. We drove harder. The road disappeared beneath snow and mud. A German shell landed somewhere ahead. The blast shook the ambulance. The engine died. I hit the steering wheel. Come on. Nothing. The medic shouted from behind me. Jack. I know. I climbed out. The hood was smoking. I opened it. A piece of metal had torn through the engine. I could hear gunfire in the distance. Not artillery. Rifles. Close. I climbed back inside. We're walking. The medic looked at the wounded men. With them? With them. We opened the rear doors. The two soldiers who could walk helped carry the others. We moved through the snow. One man couldn't stop screaming. Another kept whispering his wife's name. Then we heard voices. German. Everyone froze. I pulled my pistol. The voices got closer. Then a machine gun opened fire somewhere beyond the trees. We dropped to the ground. Snow exploded around us. One of the wounded men rolled onto his back. He was dead. Nobody spoke. We couldn't stay there. I grabbed his uniform. We're taking him. The medic looked at me. Jack, he's gone. I know. He's dead. I know. I pulled the man's body behind a broken wall. We're not leaving him here. We carried him with us. It took almost an hour to reach the main road. A military truck finally found us. The driver stopped. Where the hell did you come from? I pointed behind us. Farm. He looked at the bodies. How many? 6. He counted. That's 7. I looked at him. What? He pointed toward the back of the group. There was another soldier standing there. A young private. His uniform was covered in snow. I didn't recognize him. Who are you? He looked at me. You came for us. I asked him what unit he belonged to. He gave me the same unit designation as the wounded soldier who had convinced me to return. I turned toward that soldier. He was lying unconscious on the truck. I looked back. The young private was gone. I searched the road. Nothing. The driver started yelling at me. Get in. I climbed aboard. We reached the field hospital just before midnight. The wounded were taken inside. The dead soldier was placed with the other casualties. I stayed beside him for a moment. His name was written on his jacket. Corporal Thomas Reed. I wrote it down. Then I went to find the soldier who had asked me to return. His bed was empty. I asked the nurse where he had been taken. She checked the paperwork. Then looked at me. There isn't anyone here under that name. I gave her the unit number. She checked again. Nothing. I went to the officer in charge. He looked at my report. You said he sent you back to the farm? Yes. He couldn't have. Why? The officer turned the paper around. The unit had been listed as missing since the previous evening. Every man from that unit had been accounted for. Except one. Corporal Thomas Reed. I looked at him. That doesn't make sense. He pointed toward the body bag. That's Reed. I felt cold. Then who talked to me? The officer didn't answer. Behind us, the medic suddenly shouted. I turned. The soldier with the chest wound was awake. He was staring directly at me. He whispered. You shouldn't have gone back. I walked toward him. Why? His eyes moved toward the window. Because they weren't waiting for you. Then he stopped breathing. I stood beside the bed for a few seconds, waiting for the medic to tell me I was wrong. He didn't. The soldier was dead. I looked through the window. Snow covered everything outside. I kept thinking about the farm. About the 6 men. About the soldier who had asked me to come back. And about the young private who disappeared from the road. I should have reported everything. Instead, I went back to the garage. At 2:15 a.m., my commanding officer found me beside the ambulance. "You're not going anywhere." "I need to go back." "No. There are men still at that farm. We already sent a patrol. They'll be dead before they get there." He stared at me. "You're an ambulance driver, Turner. You're not infantry." "I know." "Then act like it." He walked away. I started the engine. The ambulance barely moved. I repaired the damaged line with whatever I could find. Then I drove. Nobody stopped me. The road was almost completely covered by snow. When I reached the farm, I found the 2 soldiers who had stayed behind. Alive. Barely. One had a broken arm. The other had been shot through the leg. They looked at me like I was something they had imagined. "You came back." I said I would. We loaded them into the ambulance. Then I heard something outside. A voice. "Jack." I froze. It was the same voice. The soldier who had sent me back. I stepped outside. Nobody was there. Only snow. Then I saw footprints leading toward the trees. I followed them. They stopped beside a dead German tank. Behind it was a soldier sitting against the metal. American uniform. Young. Frozen. I recognized him. The private from the road. I checked his pockets. His identification tag gave me a name. Private Daniel Harris. There was something else. A folded letter. It was addressed to his mother. I put it in my pocket. Then I heard artillery. I ran back to the ambulance. We drove. The 2 wounded men survived. The war moved on. Bastogne eventually became a story people told in newspapers. For me, it never became a story. It stayed in my head. Years later, I requested the military records from December 1944. I wanted to know what had happened to the men from that farm. The record said the unit had been trapped for 2 days. 6 men were listed as rescued. 1 was listed as killed. His name was Corporal Thomas Reed. I stared at the page. The soldier who had spoken to me was not listed as missing, wounded, or anywhere. I checked the photographs from the battle. Then I found one. A group of soldiers standing beside an ambulance. I was in the photograph. So was the medic. So were the wounded men. And standing behind us was the young private. Daniel Harris. The photograph had been taken on December 20th, 1944. The problem was that Daniel Harris had died on December 18th. 2 days before the photograph. I kept the picture. I also kept his letter. I never mailed it. I couldn't. Because the letter wasn't finished. It ended halfway through a sentence. "Mom, if they send the ambulance back for us, tell the driver." That's where it stopped. I never knew what he wanted me to tell her. Maybe he wanted me to say they were alive. Maybe he wanted me to say they weren't alone. Or maybe he just wanted somebody to remember they had been there. I drove ambulances for the rest of the war. I carried hundreds of wounded men. I carried hundreds of dead ones too. But I never forgot that night in Belgium. Because sometimes, when you're driving through a war zone, you learn something nobody teaches you. You don't always know whether the man asking you to stop is alive. And sometimes, you stop anyway. But there was one thing I never told anyone. 3 nights after I found Daniel's body, I woke up to knocking. 3 slow knocks on the wall beside my bed. I waited. Nothing. Then came 3 more. Knock. 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 I didn't move. I already knew that sound. It was the same sound we'd heard beneath the farm. The next morning, I checked the wall. There were 3 wet fingerprints on it. Fresh. And beneath them, written in the dust, was one word. Jack.